Adobe Acrobat Studio, so brand new. Show me all the things PDFs can do. Do your work with ease and speed. PDF Spaces is all you need. Do hours of research in an instant with key insights from an AI assistant. Pick a template with a click. Now your prezzo looks super slick. Close that deal? Yeah, you won. Do that, doing that, did that, done. Now you can do that with Acrobat. Now you can do that with the all-new Acrobat. It's time to do your best work with the all-new Adobe Acrobat Studio.
I turned off news altogether.
I hate to say it, but I don't trust much of anything.
It's the rage bait.
It feels like it's trying to divide people.
If we got clear facts, maybe we could calm down a little.
NBC News brings you clear reporting. Let's meet at the facts. Let's move forward from there. NBC News, reporting for America.
¿Hablas español?
Sprichst du Deutsch?
Kann du Norsk?
If you used Babbel, you would. Babbel's conversation-based techniques teaches you useful words and phrases to get you speaking quickly about the things you actually talk about in the real world, with lessons handcrafted by over 200 language experts and voiced by real native speakers. Babbel is like having a private tutor in your pocket. Start speaking with Babbel today. Get up to 55% off your Babbel subscription right now at babbel.com/Spotify, spelled BABBEL.com/Spotify. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Hello and welcome to Away the podcast. It's Martin here, and today we've got another episode of On This Week, where we take a jaunt down Sunderland memory lane, reminiscing about some of the great and some of the not so great things that have happened on this week in the history of Sunderland AFC. And today we're looking back on events that took place between the 10th and 16th of November, and I'm fortunate enough to have a couple of fine gentlemen to help me do just that. So first of all, we'll say hello to Kelvin Beattie. Hello, Kelvin.
Oh, good morning. Good morning, Martin. You usually leave me to last.
I know. I like to mix things up.
Me
I
out
like to
there.
keep people on their toes, Kelvin. That's what it's all about, isn't it?
Just what I need, Martin. Thank you very much.
Well, it's like football, isn't it? You could be the sub-goalkeeper. You've still got to prepare because there could be a red card in the first minute, and you have to spring into action, Kelvin.
Yeah, ever ready, boy. I'm like a battery. I'm ever ready.
And also joining us today is Andrew Smithson. Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning. Hello, everybody. If Kelvin's the sub-keeper, I think I'm the fifth choice keeper who's only there to put the cones out and make sure all the bibs get washed at the end of the training session.
Well, he could be like Scott Carson and play like 2 games in about 10 years, but pick up an array of winners' medals, couldn't he? And have them displayed nicely in the mantelpiece. So
yeah, it's a canny gig, isn't it?
Hey, it's not bad, isn't it? You'd absolutely take that job on. And Andrew, at the end of the last episode, you left us with a quiz. Now, I must admit, I've had to cheat to find the answer out of this one. I've had to look it up.
Yes, yeah, it's an interesting one though, I thought. So the question was, the only player to score for the club under 2 different surnames was born 13th of November, 1937, and I asked, who was that? So you've already admitted to cheating, Martin. I mean, it's a poor do when the host is cheating. But Kelvin, have you got any suggestions?
I'm surprised Martin cheated because this lad was born just a couple of miles away from where he was brought up. So
he was, yes. No, I discovered that.
So come on then, boys. Do you want to do the honours and give us a name?
I haven't got a hope of getting this one.
Yeah. Very good. Yes, Alan Hope, who he changed his name via deed poll in 1957 to Alan O'Neill. At that point, he took on his stepfather's name, although by that stage in his career, he'd already made his first team debut. Now, a couple of things to touch upon there. Some records say that he grew up in Ledgate, which you were referring to there, Kelvin. I've now spotted a couple of sources that suggest that he was actually born in Deptford, in Sunderland. Either way, I mean, it might be one of those where he was born in Deptford but then moved away as a youngster. Either way, he was a local lad. Now, his first goals for us were actually scored after his name had been changed. So it was deed poll in April 1957 that everything was signed off. But for record-keeping purposes, because it was still during the playing season, they decided to stick with his original name of Alan Hope for the time being. So come the 1st of May, 1957, you might have asked for his signature and he might have signed it Alan O'Neill. But in the newspapers and in the official records, his 2 goals in a 3-2 loss away at Portsmouth, as I say, on the 1st of May, they were credited as Alan Hope. It was only on the 9th of May 1957, so the following week, as part of the club announcing the retained list, that it was then announced to the public that he was going to be using his new name going forward. So strictly speaking, we did have an Alan O'Neill on the books at that time, but it wasn't until 1957-58 that he became known by that name publicly, and that's why the records might confuse people a bit. Another thing to just confuse matters, his first name, Alan, he looks to have used 2 different spellings of it. So, you know, if you're trying to research a footballer and he's changing his first name and his surname, you're going to have a job tracking him down. Throw into that the confusion about where he was born, and we could be talking about an entirely different person for all I know. But yeah, there you go. The only Sunderland player to score for the club under 2 different surnames.
Oddly enough, it is coincidentally, and this was before you brought him up as a quiz question. I was talking to an old fella on the bus. Great source of information, the old worthies, you know, and he was struggling to remember who the player was that had played for Sunderland under 2 different names. And he set us away. You know, I'm thinking, that's going to be earworm all game to me. That I hate stuff like that. You know, I'm like, who is that player? You know, and when I got to him, I went away and found out. So I was talking to him on the bus going to the Everton game, and he started filling us in because he'd seen him play quite a bit, and he said he was a good enough player, but never quite realised his potential at Sunderland. Was his view. I went to Villa and Bournemouth and a couple of other places apparently as well.
That's interesting, Kelvin. Sorry, because from what I could find out about him, he played like 70 odd games for us at inside left. He scored 28 goals, but never really nailed down a spot in the side. So that backs up what your pal was saying on the bus. Also, there's an answer for anybody that listened to an earlier pod where a certain K. Beattie asked whether he should go to the Everton game or not. So there you go. Anybody who was wondering, you know, panicking about Kelvin's domestic arrangements, you did make it to the match, thankfully.
Yes.
And
didn't we do
right,
well? We did well to rest that game away from Everton, I thought. At half-time, I thought there was only going to be one winner.
Well, you can talk about that next year on this week, looking back at things that happened the week before this one that we're going to talk about.
Champion.
I'll just say one quick thing. At half-time when we were losing, were you thinking, "Oh bloody hell! I should have stayed at home too"?
No, I never think that. Andrew. Yeah. Good.
Right, we will get into November the 10th because in 1934, there was a great game, by the sounds of it, at Roker Park. Sunderland took on Manchester City, and Man City went 2 up in 37 minutes, 2 goals from Eric Brook. A goal from Patsy Gallagher on 42, and then a goal from Bobby Gurney on 44, made it 2-2 at half-time, and Bobby Gurney got one shortly after the break to make it 3-2. And interestingly, in the Man City team that day was a certain Matt Busby playing for the blue side of the city rather than the red side that he became a lot more famously associated with. 1973, Dennis Stewart scored what was his only hat-trick for the lads in a 4-1 win over Swindon. And in 1976, Kelvin, I think this was a game that you talked about a few weeks ago when we were looking at, before the Man United game, when we did a podcast looking at games away at Manchester United. 1976, Sunderland came back from 2 down at half-time to draw 3-3, 2 goals from Bob Lee and another from Billy Hughes to give us a 3-3 draw at Old Trafford. Now, 2002, this marked the end of a very good relationship. It was only a temporary end between Sunderland and Niall Quinn. On this day, Sunderland actually won a game under Howard Wilkinson, which was a rarity in itself. Kevin Phillips and Tory Andrea Flo, surprisingly, was a goal scorer on that day. But yeah, Niall Quinn announced his retirement. I think he played, because he started the season off as a coach under Peter Reid, hadn't he? And he'd come off the bench on a couple of occasions, and I think he was wearing the number 29 shirt, if memory serves me correctly. But Howard Wilkinson's first game, he came off the bench and almost equalised. I remember he had a lob at the north stand end, and the goalkeeper, whether the goalkeeper just saved it or it hit the post or the bar or something. But that was his last action in the Sunderland shirt, I think, because he was struggling with a back injury. He had a bit of a problem with it for quite a while, but I think behind the scenes, him and Wilkinson weren't seeing eye to eye. And yeah, Quinny decided not that long really after Wilkinson had arrived that it was time for him to depart.
Martin, you're dead right. I did not know that, but yeah, Niall Quinn wore squad number 29 that season.
There you go.
Any guesses as to who took over his previous number, which was number 9?
Was it Flo?
It was. So I don't quite know what would have happened there, because I think Flo signed after the season had started.
He did. So perhaps, I remember Quinn having 29 on the opening day of the season. We played Blackburn.
Yes.
And I was at that game, and I remember him coming off the bench.
Yeah.
And I hadn't realised he was wearing number 29 until he came on. So I remember it standing out to me.
Yeah, just scanning through, that season, his final handful of games were all from the bench. So maybe, like you say, he'd been appointed a coach. Maybe they were already thinking Quinn needs to start, easing off his minutes. Obviously, fitness was starting to hamper him. But I mean, come on, Niall Quinn or Tory Andre Flo. I think I know who my preferred number 9 would be out of those two.
Absolutely. Well, that was the famous, or that season rather, was a famous picture where Roy Keane had got sent off for Manchester United because Flo had scored in his debut, hadn't he, for us against Man U? And Quinny's on the sidelines. I think whether he just come on and sub or whether he was on the sideline, but him and Ferguson had a bit of a go, and I think Quinn had gone over to Keane when Keane was on his way off the field after kind of falling into the trap that Jason McAteer had set him. So, he had a few incidents that he signed off with, didn't he? 2007. Now, we played a game against Newcastle at the Stadium of Light. This was one Roy Keane, Sunderland, took on the Mags. Danny Higginbottom scored for us, and James Milner equalised. I think he equalised. It was an equalising goal, wasn't it, where it kind of bounced. It was a cross, and it bounced past Craig Gordon. But I hadn't realised until I looked that up. Sam Allardyce was Newcastle's manager that day. I hadn't remembered that. So there you go. That was a Sam Allardyce's Newcastle team that we drew with. And in 2013, Gus Poyet's Sunderland took on Man City at home, and we won 1-0, and Phil Bardsley scored And he was playing at left back, and he kind of cut in and curled it around the goalkeeper. But this match always stands out to me because I kind of think this was the start of Poyet at Sunderland, really. I remember this was the first time that Poyet's style was really evident. I think he'd kind of come in and he'd obviously got some results, but this was the first real game I remember that he was really putting his style of play onto the team. You could see the sort of deep line midfielder coming in and sitting in between the two centre halves, letting the fullbacks push up. And it was quite a different style of play. I remember watching the game, 12 years ago now, isn't it? But it's still one I can remember quite a lot, because I think that really kind of set the tone for what Poyet then went on to do over the couple of seasons that followed.
I always wish we'd seen more of Poyet. I would have liked us to have dug in a bit more with him, because I liked the way he set the team up and the way that we played.
Well, he did. He kind of imploded at the end, didn't he? That was the problem with it.
We've all got an implosion in with, though, haven't we?
Yeah, but our implosions don't take the form of an open letter to tens of thousands of football supporters. You know, I think that's you're probably asking for trouble when you're starting to do that type of thing.
God, no hiding place.
Well, there isn't. I think that was part of the problem. And you go into Poyet and you look at that Hull game in the FA Cup. And I still go back to that, and I think his Sunderland career could have been so different if he'd put a half-decent side out that day rather than resting a load of players. But anyway, that Man City game, interesting enough, the goalie that Bardsley scored against was, any guesses?
Was it Pantilimon?
It was Pantilimon.
Oh, okay.
Indeed it was, and Julian Lescott was at centre-half that day with Jack.
I can always remember... I always remember coming out of Wembley from the League Cup game and making our way back to King's Cross. Me and our young'un were staying in King's Cross, and we'd been in this pub before the game in the King's Cross area, and we'd had cracking, really good time. And as we were heading, we thought, we'll go back to that pub and cheer ourselves up. We were coming down the street, and all we could hear was this noise coming out the pub, and Sunderland fans singing, "You can stuff the League Cup up your arse." we're going to win the FA Cup, you know. Oh, God. It sort of, at the time, it was very, very funny. And then our young'un, I couldn't go to the whole game, and our young'un went, and he rang us. He rang us outside the ground after the game. He was furious. His bloody team, we're never going to win that bloody game. You know? Oh, God. Yeah. The joys.
Yep, it's a roller coaster, isn't it? You can certainly liken it to that. November the 11th, now 1945. Pop Robertson, who we've spoken about now and again in this podcast, he was born in 1945. 14 years later, 1959, there was an under-23 international at Roker Park. England beat France 2-0, but Joe Baker, who again, another person we've spoken about in this podcast before, who was then a Hibs player, scored one of the goals for England. Now, 1989, Sunderland were playing Wolves at home, and the striker for Wolves, Steve Bull, was making a load of headlines for being a great goal scorer in the lower divisions. And of course, he ended up going to Italia in 90 and getting capped by England the following summer. Marco was also making a lot of headlines, and these two strikers were kind of almost going head to head this season. They were being linked with first division clubs, and they were the two most exciting strikers in the division, well, in the country, perhaps. Certainly English strikers to some degree. And this game was billed as Gabbiadini versus Steve Bull. And it was a 1-1 draw, and neither of them scored. Andy Much scored for Wolves, and the Paul Hardiman penalty got the goal for Sunderland. 1998, we went to Goodison Park. This was a great game. We played Everton in the fourth round of the League Cup. Mickey Bridges scored for us in the first half after about half an hour. And John Collins, who obviously went on to manage Hibs and I think Celtic, didn't he? Was he a Celtic manager? I think he was for a spell, certainly at Hibs. But he went on to have a managerial career. But John Collins equalised. Don Hutchison was playing for Everton, and the game went to a penalty shootout. Now, we were obviously in the first division, it would have been at the time, I guess, wasn't it? And Everton were in the Premier League. But this was I think this was a sort of big moment in that season, because this proved to everybody that we could go and compete with the better teams, the bigger clubs. And I remember travelling over to Liverpool to go to that game, and it was a very long night because obviously it went to extra time and it went to penalties. Sunderland scored through Martin Scott, Alan Johnson, Martin Smith, Chris Macon hit the bar. John Oster missed for Everton. Lee Clark scored a pen for us. I think that was Clark's first game back after he'd broken his leg on the first game of the season. I think it was Lee Clark coming back, and that was a really big, pivotal moment for us to get him back in the team, because he was a superb player for us that season. And Niall Quinn scored our sixth penalty, our fifth goal, and Bakayoko, the Championship manager legend, had his penalty saved by Thomas Sorensen to seal the win. But the Everton goalkeeper that night, we seem to be on a theme of goalkeepers here today, the Everton goalkeeper that night was Thomas Myra.
Ooh, right.
Who I always thought was a really good goalkeeper for us, and I thought he was really quite underrated. But there you go. Michael Proctor also made his debut that day as well.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, because I seem to remember Proctor being involved. I think we did make a couple of minor changes to the team, and that really showed the depth in our squad, that we could still go away to a top flight club and beat them. And if I remember rightly, Bridges' goal was really well taken.
It was.
I'm trying to replay it through my mind, but yeah, it was a good goal.
It was. You look at the team, like Martin Smith, who wasn't always in the team that season, was in the starting line. Darren Williams looks as if he played in the centre midfield with Paul Thirlwell. So you're going away to Everton. Obviously, Kevin Ball was out. Lee Clark, as I say, come back from injury. Alex Ray wasn't about the squad that day. So yeah, strength and depth absolutely really, really showed. And again, I think that gave confidence to the team. Because you look at the Everton side, and they had, say, Materazzi, Richard Dunn, Can Marjorie, John Collins, Duncan Ferguson, Olivier Decor, Bakayoko, people like that. They had a good side out.
Some good names there.
Oh, it certainly is. And Walter Smith's Everton side were knocked out of the cup by the lads. In 2006, now we played Southampton in a game at the Stadium of Light. It was a 1-1 draw. Ross Wallace scored for us, and this was a game Gareth Bale got a very late equaliser. And I think this was the kind of the spell where Gareth Bale was kind of coming on to I guess with the wider fame, wasn't he? He was kind of getting on people's radars, and people are starting to take a little bit more note of him, because he must have only been 17 at this point. So he's just starting to come into the Southampton team, and I've got a sneaky feeling it was one of his. I was going to say it's his first goal. I was just having a look. It wasn't his first goal. It was one of his first goals for Southampton. He was playing left back, I think, and I think he kind of obviously progressively moved forward, further forward as his career went along. But yeah, that was an early sign of Gareth Bale. Now there was three. Sorry, go on, mate.
I was just going to say, he didn't half make hay as a youngster, Bale, did he?
He certainly made hay in the last minute of this game. There was three people with Sunderland connections in the team for Southampton that day.
Kelvin Davis
was in goal. Yeah, Ross Wallace scored past him on the hour mark.
I'm tempted to be cruel and say I know a couple of Kelvins who are clowns, but that's a little bit harsh, because that Gareth Bale joke was quite funny, actually.
Yeah.
I'm only teasing.
As long as it wasn't the last straw, Andrew. Yeah. Away then, we've got Kelvin Davis. Who else?
Kelvin Davis is a defender and a forward.
Was it Future players, sorry, or...
I didn't specify.
Oh, I wonder if Kenwyn Jones, maybe?
Kenwyn Jones was
Nice
up front.
shout.
Yeah.
Aye.
And a
And a defender.
Mm.
Oh,
Now, this one surprised me because I've got no recollection at all of this lad playing for Southampton.
Was it Danny Higginbotham?
No.
Oh. I thought I'd had a burst of inspiration.
A nice seamless link from earlier.
Yeah.
Southampton.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Chris Magan?
Yes, Chris Magan.
Oh, good shout,
right.
Andrew.
Well
Right.
I've got no memory at all of him playing for Southampton, so there you go. And the Southampton manager also was a former Sunderland player.
George Burley?
Correct, well done.
Get in. Good shout, Andrew. Boy, you're on form today.
Isn't he?
Aye. Well, this time yet, lads, to trip myself up.
2018 on the 11th of November, we played Port Vale in the FA Cup. George Honeyman scored the opening goal after just 38 seconds, and Lyndon Gooch got the other one. In 2022, this was a game that we played Birmingham away, and we beat them 2-1. Ahmad scored that goal where he cut inside and he curled it with his left foot. Tony Mowbray's Sunderland. Obviously, I think it was the last game before the World Cup started. That was the year that the World Cup was in December, wasn't it? And if I remember rightly, sitting in the stands alongside Kira Louis-Dreyfus was the fella who's now the Bristol City manager. There's Stuber, Gerhard.
Yeah.
Right.
He used to be the Barnsley manager, and he was sat alongside the Sunderland hierarchy on that day, and there was speculation that he was about to come into the club at some point. But there you go. And then exactly a year later, Sunderland played Birmingham again. We played them at home. We beat them 3-1. Wayne Rooney's Birmingham, it was. Because in the game in 2022, Joe Bellingham started for Birmingham. Exactly a year later, Job opened the scoring on 17 minutes as we beat them 3-1. Adil Aushish got a goal for us. Deon Sanderson scored an own goal to get a goal for us. And this game was also the debut of somebody who is rumoured to not like Sam Fender very much. Eliza Mayenda came off the bench on 74 to replace Patrick Roberts. But we're going to go back, all the way back to 1922, Andrew, and a North East derby as Sunderland took on Newcastle at Roker Park.
Yes, quite right. 11th of November 1922. So we are talking over 100 years ago. Which, when I looked at that and when that clicked, I don't know why that just felt like wow. I can't even explain. It was just a peculiar feeling. But yes, over 100 years ago, we were playing Newcastle at Roker Park. Some things never change because the rivalry was is strong then, and it's strong now. You might remember, gents, in an early episode of the podcast, we spoke about about our manager from that period, Robert or Bob Kyle, who had a long stint in charge. He was Sunderland boss from 1905 to 1928. So he's coming towards the end of his time in the hot seat. He famously got us a league title in 1913, and also that year he took Sunderland to our first FA Cup final. But also he was known for being in charge at a time when the club was spending big money. And when we spoke about Kyle previously, we talked a bit about March 1922. That was like a particularly expensive time. We signed a forward called Jock Patterson from Leicester City. That was on the morning, and that was a club record fee. And yet by the end of the day, we'd not only broken our club record fee, but also the world record fee when we signed Michael Gilhooly from Hull City. That was the 2nd of March, but we still weren't content because 24 hours later, on the 3rd of March, we go and break the world transfer record again when we paid £5,500 to South Shields for Warney Creswell. So that's the era we're talking about. Sunderland are splashing the cash. We needed to, because that season Sunderland had been struggling and would be mid-table. However, later in the calendar year, and we're now talking season 1922 to 23, you're starting to see those a couple of those players bed in and show their value. Gilhooly struggled. I'm assuming it was injury because he had large absences out of the team. But Patterson and Cresswell are really looking a proper part of the team. The side finished 1922-23 as runners-up. So from mid-table to runners-up, there's a very clear jump in form. It's the home record that is the main driver behind this. I mean, at Roker Park, we are phenomenal. We win 15, we draw 5, and we lose only 1. So, you know, that's proper fortress territory. You know, that's proper saying your home ground is a place that away teams fear coming to. And as you might expect, during that season, we've got a great record at home, and yet who attracts the biggest crowd? It's always Newcastle. Doesn't matter whether we are playing well or we're struggling. The Mags are always going to see a big crowd in the stand. On this day, it's 47,000 are in the ground. There's a bit of in the air. There's revenge is on the cards, because during that season, gents, games were played in pairs. So you would play the team at their ground one week, and then you'd have the return 7 days later. We'd lost up on Tyneside 2-1. Had Kelvin been around in those days, I dare say he would have been sat in the home end, winding up some poor Newcastle fans stood next to him. But it was before his time, so you weren't there, Kelvin. But yeah, we'd lost at their place. We didn't have long to kind of wait to get revenge because of this rather interesting way the fixtures were laid out in that period. There was no guarantee of us beating them, though, because we had not won against the Mags in our last 5 attempts. So, yeah, they obviously had a bit of a hoodoo over us. That said, the team were improving. The new lads had started to settle in and look good. The starting 11, you might recognise some of these names, folks. Ted Robson was in goal. Creswell was playing. Ernie England was playing. Then we had George Hunter, Charlie Parker, and John Poole. And then our forward line was pretty good. Alex Donaldson, Charlie Buchan, Jock Patterson, who we mentioned earlier, Arthur Hawes, and Billy Ellis. Nearly said Billy Elliott, but it was Billy Ellis. So that's a strong forward line in particular. Both teams, again, as you might expect with it being a derby, both teams are up for it, and the first exchanges are pretty exciting. Both teams are trying to stamp their authority and get an early lead. It's not one of those derbies that are cagey. The sides are going for it and trying to nudge themselves ahead. But we, before half-time, have a really big slice of luck. A Newcastle player called Peter Mooney is injured in an accidental collision with Hunter. Seemingly Hunter has fallen awkwardly on top of Mooney, and that's his day done. Before half-time, he's having to be stretchered off. And, of course, we're talking the days of no substitutions. So for the rest of the game, Newcastle are down to 10 men. Not only that, Mooney had been the player tasked with marking Charlie Buchan. So once he was off the pitch, that was just Buchan's invite to just start taking control. We scored really quickly after the break. It was Arthur Hawes who gets a header after Donaldson has put a cross in right on the byline. Then 10 minutes later, as I say, Buchan is just tearing into the mags now. He does all the hard work. He then sets away Patterson, who runs into the box and blasts a low shot into the net. That's Sunderland. 2-0 up. We're looking great. Buchan is having just the time of his life. It's only last-ditch defending from Newcastle that keeps it down to 2-0, but we really dominate them. Charlie Buchan, clear man of the match candidate, but Ellis at outside left also did well for us. On another day, it could have very easily been one of those famous scores that get talked about for years and years, where you absolutely hammer your near rivals. But we have to settle for 2-0. The points took us up to second place in the table for the first time that season, and we stayed there for the rest of the campaign. Unfortunately, we don't end up pushing eventual champions Liverpool as much as we would have liked. We had 1 or 2 shock defeats in the final weeks, and it's really frustrating because when you look at Liverpool towards the end of the season, they started stuttering as well and only just limped over the line. So you think, if we'd maybe got some more positive results in those defeats, could we have started panicking them and forced our way into top spot? But hey, there you go. Big win. Always a memorable win over Newcastle. And it's in a season where we finished second, which I dare say, lads, we would both, all three of us even, don't know who I mean by both, you both, including me, to make it 3, would, I think we'd settle for that, wouldn't we? A couple of wins over the Mags and second in the league? Or
I think
am I selling ourselves short there?
No, I think we've got to be realistic, haven't we?
Fair enough. So are we gonna settle for 3rd instead?
Yeah.
A couple of the players there I just wanted to touch upon. George Hunter, the player who was involved in the injury that forced Newcastle down to 10 men. He wasn't a name I knew much about. So I dug out my absolute record and had a look at him. He did only play for us 12 times, which is obviously why it wasn't a name that resonated. He was from Southampton, so he was another local lad. We signed him from Hilton Colliery. However, he also had a stint working at Wearmouth Colliery and is the only Sunderland AFC player known to have worked there. Obviously, that's where the Stadium of Light is now, and we've got such a big connection with the mining industry. But yeah, George Hunter is the one man that we can say for sure had a connection. So I quite like that little stat about him.
That's excellent.
Yeah. The other 2 players I was just going to look at Arthur Hawes, whose nickname was Tricky. So that gives you an idea of the type of player he was. He'd been another pricey signing the season before. Like Creswell, we'd signed him from South Shields. And again, thanks to my trusty and very battered copy of the absolute record, I learned that he insisted on playing throughout his career whilst holding a handkerchief in his left hand. Now, lads, that's that was an interesting one. That I wonder how that came about.
You need to watch out for Tricky Hawes here.
Yes, that is a very good life lesson, Kelvin. That is a good motto to keep hold of. We'll move swiftly on. Jock Patterson, who was one of the scorers on this day, he played 39 league games that season. He scored 21 goals, so he was second in the team only to Charlie Buchan. He scored a hat-trick that season in an FA Cup win over Burnley. He was only at Sunderland for 2 years before moving to Preston North End, and yet his record was really good. He scored 40 goals for us in 76 appearances, which is a brilliant return. Reading between the lines, I think maybe injuries were a bit of an issue, and that's why he didn't stay with us longer. Again, I'm putting 2 and 2 together here and perhaps coming to conclusions. But during World War I, he was wounded on 5 separate occasions. So I don't know if that is then impacting his career afterwards. You know, some of those issues then become worse over time. During World War I, he'd served in the infantry with Blackwatch, who were the Royal Regiment of Scotland. Do either of you recognise Blackwatch?
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah,
know
the Black Watch. Yeah.
Yeah, well, Kelvin, you have very possibly mentioned Blackwatch on this podcast before, because that's who Jim Baxter carried out his national service with in the early 1960s. So there's a bit of a link there. 2 Sunderland players have served for them. I had a little look, and they had quite a long list of famous servants over the years. The other one that jumped out at me was Fulton Mackay. Do either of you know who that was? He was an actor who served, or he became an actor after the Second World War, but he served with Blackwatch, having enlisted for them. He played Mr. Mackay in the TV series Porridge, which is what I know him for best. And the final episode of Porridge, the final ever scene, he actually mentioned Sunderland. It's something I remember. I remember watching repeats of the episodes back in the day when I was a young kid. I've always loved watching old episodes of Porridge. And yeah, one of the final ever lines in this, like one of the most famous British comedies ever, Mr. Mackay, the character who's a prison guard, he makes a joke about Sunderland and one of the new inmates coming from the town of Sunderland. So it's just what, you know, when you're a kid and you get a mention of somewhere, you know, and it's not in a context you're expecting. I only ever heard Sunderland being mentioned on Final Score or Grandstand. So there I am watching a repeat of a comedy from the 70s and Sunderland get a name check, and I'm buzzing about it. I think it's hilarious. So there you go. That was, as I say, over 100 years ago. We beat the Mags. We finished second, and there's a link to a couple of other well-known names.
Excellent. Very good.
I was just going to say, lads, do either of you have it? I feel as if after doing a bit of a speech or a seminar like that, I need to end it with any questions, lads. Does anybody have any follow-ups they want to ask?
One of the things that strikes me whenever we're talking about this era, you know, is you keep forgetting, don't you, the World War, the Great War, will have impacted all these players in some way, shape, or form, don't you? I'm really guilty of that, at looking at the stats and looking at the math sort of reports and stuff like that, and then thinking there's a human story behind all these lads, you know, at this time, and all the people as well, the fans, you know. I'm thinking there's 50,000 in Roker Park for that derby, and coming towards the end of the season, there's like 8,000 rolling in and we're second in the league. But you've got no idea of the hardship or the state of play socially at the time. Just keep forgetting about all that. Thank God for football.
Well, I think it probably helped a lot of people in those dark years afterwards. just forget about some of the horrors they experienced or they heard about from loved ones. The 20s were really difficult financially, and that's probably why towards the end of the season, when it looks as if we're not going to win the title, the crowds plummet. It is a time when people paid on the gate. You hadn't bought a season ticket in advance and paid up front. So, if there's nothing on the game and money's perhaps a little bit tight, you probably do stay away. You're right as well. We always need to remember, and of course it's November, which is a time for remembrance. The impact of the wars on individuals was so distressing. Jock Patterson, who I've spoken about there, because he'd served and he'd seen frontline action, because he'd been wounded on 5 separate occasions, in the years afterwards, he was a bit of a poster boy in football. We signed him from Leicester City, as I say, for big money. He was the player that we broke our club record fee for at the start of the day, before opening the checkbook again later. At Leicester, he was a really well-known player, and I just wonder if because of his history, he got a bit more attention and focus and was a name that not just the fans of the teams that he played for recognised. I get the impression that he was a well-known character in general because of his military experience.
It's interesting as well with both wars. I think it had an impact on how players kind of perceived football career length. Because you look at Charlie Buchan, who's in the lineup for us for this game, he goes on to play until he's 37, 38. Rach Carter, Second World War, of course, but he had a long career after he played well into his 30s, didn't he? And I think you obviously saw that shift. The next generation down, players would retire in their early 30s. This generation obviously wanted to. You imagine feeling quite aggrieved that you've had 3, 4, 5 years of your career taken away from you, and then want to play for as long as possible because you're still there.
Yeah. Well, it's the practicalities of finance.
Well, that's the other bit to it, isn't it?
Employment was scarce, and if you are being offered the chance to get paid to be out in the open air and doing a relatively enjoyable job, you're going to have to think long and hard about retiring from that in that era when life was difficult. We talk about being a professional footballer now as being amazing. Well, back then, the comparisons to what the regular fella on the street was having to do to earn a crust, it was just night and day.
Certainly was. We will take a short break at that point, and we will be back with you very soon.
Every successful business evolves. And to keep up, you need a bank relationship that evolves too. When you collaborate with KeyBank, you don't get one-size-fits-all solutions. Our expansive team of experts across industry verticals wouldn't be here if you did. Always ready with bespoke solutions for your biggest challenges and opportunities. We know all businesses are different, and that's why we approach business differently. Reimagine business as usual. KeyBank opens doors. Learn more at key.com/B2B.
The Lincoln Wishlist sales event is happening now. Here's what's on everyone's wish list. Enjoying holiday jingles with brilliant 3D audio that surrounds you? Check. Watching snow flurries through the panoramic Vista roof? Check. Packing up presents with the spacious Lincoln Splitgate? Check. Everything you want. All standard on the 2025 Lincoln Navigator SUV. Visit your local Lincoln retailer or learn more at Lincoln.com for exceptional offers on 2025 Lincoln vehicles today.
This podcast is brought to you by Carvana. Carvana lets you buy your next car on your terms. Explore a massive inventory online, filter for what matters, and find your perfect match. Then choose delivery to your home or pick it up at one of Carvana's iconic car vending machines. Every car also comes with a 7-day money-back guarantee, so you can make sure it's the right fit. Buy your car on Carvana. Delivery or pickup fees may apply. Limitations and exclusions may apply. See our 7-day return policy at Carvana.com.
Carvana.
Welcome back to How We're the Podcast, and you join us for another episode run this week. Now, November the 12th, 1964, Kevin Ball was born in Hastings. obviously an adopted Wearsider now, but Bally was very much a southern boy when he arrived at Roker Park, when Dennis Smith drove him along the coastline, and Bally didn't even realise that the sea was near Sunderland, but he certainly settled in after a couple of red cards and a couple of dodgy performances. He firmly established himself as a very, very good player for us. Now, 1969, Sunderland played a Newcastle 11 in Len Ashurst's testimonial game at Roker Park. And we had a bit of a funny team that day, because you had Monty played a lot of the game up front, and Bobby Kerr played a bit of the game in goal and stuff like that. But it was a Newcastle 11 rather than a Newcastle United team. So Newcastle had brought in Nick Sharkey, who was at Mansfield after leaving Sunderland a couple of seasons before, and a spell at Leicester in between that. But Newcastle had Nick Sharkey on the bench. They had a few other players who kind of come in. I think Colin Suggish, who was at West Brom, was in the Newcastle team. There was a game beforehand, before the big game started. It was a 20-minute each way game between what they called the All-Stars for Sunderland and the Press. So 20 minutes each way. It finished 6-4 to the All-Stars, but you had the likes of Johnny Mapson, George Hardwick, Stan Anderson, Frank Brennan, Ian McFarlane, George Hurd, Billy Elliott. People like that were playing for the All-Stars. Jackie Milburn was up front for the Press team, and Bob Cass and Tony Hardesty and people like that. But the main event itself was it was less than 7,000 people there, which was an interesting one. I think we got beaten 3-0 at Newcastle the weekend before, which might have impacted the crowd. But Sunderland played the game. Bob Moncur, obviously playing for Newcastle 11, got the opening goal. Frank Clark, who would go on to be assistant manager at Sunderland in the 80s, scored an own goal to equalise. Dennis Stewart got a goal for Sunderland. Jimmy Montgomery got a penalty. Somebody called Jim Scott got a goal back for Newcastle, and Dennis Stewart got a goal late on. But it was interesting because Alan Brown was giving all of these accolades about Len Ashurt, saying how good a player he was and how important the player he was for him. Alan Brown didn't actually go to the game. He went off on a scouting mission to watch Brian Clough's Derby play Manchester United on the same night, because we were playing Derby in our next game. So Alan Brown missed the game. But there's an interesting point to this story, which I'm wondering if anybody listening was there at this game can clarify this for us, right? Because in the newspaper reports, it suggests that Newcastle paraded the Fairs Cup around the ground at half-time, led by Bob Moncur. Now, that's what the newspaper reports suggest. And I'd done something for the website a few years ago about this. And Rob Mason, obviously club historian and the font of all Sunderland knowledge, dropped me an email saying, where did you get that bit of information from? I've never heard that. I was at that game. I can't remember that. So that puts a seed of doubt whether it's a mischievous Newcastle match report or something like that. But if anybody's listening who was there, please drop us a line. You can email us at howaythepodcastsafc@gmail.com and let us know if you have any memories or otherwise of that, because even in those days, it would be a fairly strange thing to do, wouldn't it?
I hope I don't upset anybody by saying this, but it's not like Newcastle to make things about themselves, is it? I mean, a testimonial for a Sunderland player. Well, I know what we'll do. We'll just, flaunt our trophy from an invitational tournament just to let everybody know that we're here. Oh dear. Interesting story though.
Surely there would have been a bit of regional pride in one of the Northeast teams winning a European trophy, eh, lads? Come on, you're being a bit curmudgeon-y there.
Regional pride in one of the Northeast towns or cities having an exhibition centre. Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah.
In the match report, Bobby Kerr had apparently pulled off some great saves, and the Evening Chronicle said Bobby Kerr was hidden by a huge cap and a jersey that went almost to his knees. but nothing could disguise his amazing reflexes. So there you go, Bobby Kerr.
Are you sure it was it wasn't Bobby Thompson rather than Bobby Kerr?
I tell you what, I wouldn't have minded watching the Press game. I remember there was a couple of games against the Press in the 80s and what have you. I reckon, we talk about Sunderland versus Newcastle, I reckon players against Press could get a bit tasty from now and again.
Yeah.
You know, people settling a few scores. You know,
if you were a player.
Yeah.
If you were a player, and I'll tell you what, if John Donahue or somebody like that was playing your bugger,
Well, the thing
I'll
is,
show him.
We've heard the stories on this podcast before, haven't we, about players calling up journals in the dead of night to complain about getting a 5 when they felt they more than deserved a 6 out of 10 in match ratings and all that sort of stuff. But no, it's
there's an on this day on the site today about journalists, a journalist who just absolutely goes to town about a game that he's been to see and doesn't spare anybody. And the reason it drew my attention, it's funny we're talking about this, was I didn't spot the headline. What I spotted was the drawing of a coffin above the report. And it said, "Rick, for anything interesting to say about this Sunderland game." And that was one of the nicer things he said. Man, it was savage, absolutely savage there. It's not just social media, you know, it's not just online that journalists have been lashing into players for years and years.
I certainly have. But I thought that was an interesting little one to
absolutely
dig into. 1980, Sunderland played Manchester City at Roker Park, and Kelvin and John Cook got the goals. This was Claudio Marangoni's last appearance for Sunderland. Now, we haven't teed this up, Kelvin, but this is a player who intrigues me. You'll have watched him play.
Yep.
What was the lowdown? Tell us about Claudio.
Claudio was what a lovely, silky player on the ball. Now, we haven't, but I'm pretty sure it was Fulham. I saw him score a goal at Fulham. My God, it was just pure class. You just thought, man, we bought an absolute world beater here. But one of the problems with Claudio Marangoni was he wasn't being played in the right position. Ken Knighton he thought he'd bought an attacking midfielder. And this lad ostensibly was a defensive midfielder or like sweeper come centre half. And that's, when he went back to South America, I think it was San Lorenzo he went back to. I'm sure the year after he was named South American, some title like South American Footballer of the Year. He had some lovely, lovely touches. And remember that we had Kevin Arnott was playing. There were some good footballers playing in the Sunderland team. We just bought Stan Cummins. There was some really good footballers playing in that team. And I always remember, I'm sure it was Gary Rowell said something about he was just 2 steps ahead of us in all the time. He was playing passes that people just weren't reading. And we just couldn't sort of keep up with his game. If there was an issue, and it wouldn't be the first time you'd heard this about a South American player, could he come and manage the hurly-burly of English football? Could he come and manage the pace at which the game was played at? And he was a big lad, big slim lad, but and he did look sometimes like he was struggling a bit in the midfield, but it wasn't until afterwards, after he'd gone, but it was only, I remember talking to a pal about 2 seasons later when that announcement had come out that he'd won that accolade. And my mate, he was a bit older than me, because I was sort of saying, God, he didn't look like he could keep up with the game well. My mate put us right. He says, "Well, we've been playing him in the wrong position when he was here." So something went wrong with the scouting system. Although Ken Knighton was absolutely delighted to sign him, and he, when you were on before about record signings, he very quickly became a record signing, didn't he? Because we'd signed Stan Cummins for a record fee, and then signed Claudio Marangoni for to beat that fee. Although we didn't actually pay that fee because he went back before his contract had expired. I think we bought him for 380,000, if memory serves me well. And when he went back, we only paid something like 230,000 because he went back before his contract was up. So you could see, Martin, in answer to your question, if you watched him week in, week out, you could see there was a cracking footballer there, little bit of a stroller, but boy, he could put the ball on a sixpence, it just went where he told it to go, but he did look like he was always moving in third gear, if you know what I mean. He never looked like he made it into fifth gear. Very, very fond memories of that period, because we're going to talk about a lad that played alongside him, with very fond memories. I thought we were on the cusp of something special happening there with that team.
Yeah, I'm just glad we learned our lessons about signing South Americans, not playing them out of position and doing proper scouting on them. I'm glad we didn't repeat that mistake at any point in the future. 1988, Sunderland played Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. Marco got a goal for Sunderland to open the scoring, and Kevin Wilson equalised for Chelsea. Now, this game's interesting if you were listening a few weeks ago, because we mentioned a lad called Gary Ogilvie, and Kelvin, you mentioned him as well. This was Gary Ogilvie's only league appearance for us. He came off the bench, and he made 3 sub-appearances, all in different competitions, but this was his only league appearance. 1983, Sunderland played Watford at home, won 1-0. Nigel Walker, now we spoke about Nigel Walker a few months ago on the podcast, a former Newcastle player. He was at Sunderland. At this point, he came on for his only appearance for an 8-minute spell as a substitute. That was his only game for Sunderland. And at that point, he had the shortest career of a Sunderland player. Now, subsequently, 2 substitutes were introduced, 3 substitutes were introduced, 5 were introduced, 9 were introduced, so however many we have these days. So you're going to get more and more people making little appearances off the bench and potentially disappearing. But I think Simon Ramsden now does hold the record, as well as a lad called Cole Keenan, who made a very short appearance off the bench in a Football League trophy sort of game, didn't he? So that game was EFL trophy against Grimsby at home in 2019. But whether you count that as a proper game or not, you can leave it up to yourselves to decide. We're going to November the 13th now. In 1880, Sunderland played a game against Ferry Hill. We got beat 1-0. It's our first ever recorded competitive game playing under the name of Sunderland and District Teachers Association Football Club. 1937, Alan Hope, as Andrew talked about earlier, as the answer to the quiz question, Alan Hope / Alan O'Neill was born potentially in Ledgate, potentially somewhere else. 1993, Sunderland got beat 4-1 at Tranmere Rovers. Now, we 1-0 up at half-time. Don Goodman had opened the scoring, but John Aldridge, a fella called Johnny Morrissey, and Pat Nevin got 2 goals for Tranmere, but Mark Proctor was in the Tranmere lineup that day.
Ooh, right.
Which stood out to me when I was looking back through those games. 2004.
He was a good player, Proctor.
I just missed him. Well, actually, I didn't miss him, but I don't remember him. But he was very highly rated when you read back at when he first got brought, the club, I think, came in on loan from Forest, and Brian Clough didn't actually want to let him go, but he wanted him to get some football. Brought him to Sunderland. We obviously managed to sign him for decent money. Had a good spell, and he, again, very highly rated with everything you read about the various managers he played under. And even when we went down to the third division, Dennis Smith was desperate to keep him, but he knew he's only the only saleable assets he had. So he went to Sheffield Wednesday for £275,000-300,000, because he was the only way Dennis Smith could actually get some money. And obviously, then he spent some of that on Marco Gabbiadini. But he, what sort of midfielder was he, Kelvin? Was he a sitter, or was he a box-to-box player, or what sort of player was he?
He had a little bit of everything in him, and I remember him and Brace playing together as well, he had a little bit of everything in him. He was strong, he could tackle, quite mobile. He's kind of a chunky lad, but quite mobile, strong on the ball, decent shot. I would guess if we'd been counting that metric, then he would have figured on the assist count as well. Box to box, you'd see him in defence. You'd see him up there in attack. I would have said to you a good 90 minutes every week. Pretty solid 7 or 8 out of 10 every week, I liked him, and I liked him in that team as well. I always remember when Brian Clough, when we were doing business with Brian, trying to prize him away from Forest, Brian Clough was saying, this he's going to be an England star of the future. He's a great, great player. He's one of the best players on our books. We got him, and I think Cloughy was a little bit upset because we didn't pay full whack, but we paid a good sum for him. And within sort of, I'm sure it was the next day in the papers, Cloughy was saying, "Oh, Mark Proctor, he couldn't trap a bag of cement, that lad." Well, he could trap a bag of cement. He was a blooming good player. I liked him tons. And I wasn't the only one. He was a very popular midfielder. You can always tell when they're about to go. It's when people come sniffing around your players and how upset people get at it. And you think, he's really popular with the crowd. Him, probably an unsung hero. As I say, 7, 8 out of 10 every week after week after week. Aye.
From what I've read about him, Kelvin, he was just a higher quality player to what he was replacing. I think as well he was one of those, he knew the game, so if needs be, I seem to think he might have played in another couple of positions as cover. Am I right in thinking he was the lad who got injured in 84-85, which was the season where we eventually got relegated? I think him being on the long-term treatment list was a real blow and one of the big factors in why we went down that year. Is that fair if I remember that right?
Yeah. He did. That's my memory of it as well. And sadly, I can always think of Len Ashurt being a bit sort of scathing about him, really, and about him, I'm sure he had a couple of pops at him, and he definitely, in Ashurst's autobiography, Left Back in Time, he has a little pop about a couple of the more established players at the time, not necessarily wanting to play for Sunderland. From what the balance of that, if you've ever read around that period, is I think they might not have wanted to play for him, in the way that he kind of went about things, just to offer a little bit of balance to that. But he did have a bad injury, and there was the makings of a team, but too much. The revolving door Durban, we were, always think about the 90s as being a terrible time for any direction with a club, but that period in the 80s was a bit like that as well. And you had all this rancor going on in the background, in the boardroom as well. You just felt like it was one step forward, two steps back, all the time. But he was definitely one of the players that would have made people who were watching at the time like me say, we're not that far away from having a decent team here. We're not that far away. How many times have we said that, though? Yeah. We're two players. That's my favourite one. I've got a mate that always says that to me. He says, here he comes, Kelvin, two players. We're two players away from being a really good team.
Ashurst's a funny one, Kelvin. I was enjoying what you were saying about him, because obviously as a player, and we spoke about his testimonial earlier, one of the greatest ever servants of the club. But there are a few people from that time who weren't too enamoured with his managerial stint. And there were a couple of stories, I think, away at Leicester on the final day of the season when he'd been brought in. I think, did one or two players even refuse to play? I can't. Or there was definitely a bit of disgruntlement. Now that, as you say, might not have been Ashurst's fault, but maybe the hierarchy above him, there was other issues at play. But Ashurst is probably somebody who deserves a proper deeper dive, because that managerial stint, he's got us to Wembley, and yet we've been relegated. So the interesting time with him in charge.
It wasn't the best, and what you see consistently coming up from a number of different sources. One of the things that I think was a factor was his style compared to Alan Durbin's style. I think they were chalk and cheese a bit, and it prompted Ashurst to tell the dressing room the holiday camp's over.
Yeah,
was one of his early sort of inputs to the dressing room. And I mean, you had players like Paul Bracewell, Mark Proctor, would Ian Atkins have been there at the time? These were bloody good players, So an intriguing, perplexing period that, and every so often that team would pull a performance out, and you'd be thinking, we're not that far away.
Two players, I think. Proctor played 138 games for us and scored 23 goals, which for a midfield is a bloody good ratio if you're getting 1 and 5, between 1 and 5 and 1 and 6, I guess, isn't it? But I'll
tell you what I always liked about him, Martin. When I was thinking about him going forward, one of the things I really liked about him, with the ball, he was a bit like a Samoan winger at rugby. He didn't have a sidestep. He just tended to just sort of breach right through tacklers, and he was kind of, as I say, quite stocky, strong, and he had a great way of just riding a tackle. And I can remember him. I cannot remember the games, but all those games. But I remember him breaching through a tackle and just lashing the ball into the goal, and you think, we haven't got too many other players on the pitch that could kind of do that, He could have been one of our legends, so he could. He's a very, very good player.
He signed for us when he was 22, right? And he'd already played about 200 games. He'd played an awful lot for Middlesbrough, come through the youth system of Borough. Obviously had the spell of Forest that we've talked about. Stays with us 4 years, as we say, after we got relegated to Division 3. He's in demand from First Division clubs. First Division clubs want him. He was Sheffield Wednesday for a couple of seasons. Borough have gone back up, I think, at that point, and they signed him again, or they might have been in the second division, but then went up the season after. And he stays there for another 4 years. So in total, he plays 250-odd games for the Borough, as well as playing all those games for us. So he finished his career with a better than 1 and 5 goal scoring record. So to do that consistently from midfield throughout your career is a bloody good effort for a central midfield player. And of course, after finishing playing, he had a long relationship with Tony Mowbray. I think he was Mowbray's assistant manager at Hibs and at Middlesbrough. So he had that relationship with Mowbray. It's just a shame I think he kind of left football after leaving Borough when Mowbray got sacked. Because it's a bit of a shame that he wasn't still around in Mowbray's circles, because he could have come back when Tony Mowbray came to Sunderland.
It would have been nice that.
It was.
Yeah.
Just to round up a couple of different avenues we went down there, the Ashurst holiday camp quote I think is quite interesting, because again, from reading Ashurst's autobiography, he was very fond of sending players away to army bases. And I think one of his, you're talking a bit like how Proctor followed Mowbray to a few clubs. I seem to think Ashurst employed as a coach at a couple of places an ex-army figure. So, of course, fitness and working the players into the ground was very clearly a go-to method of his. Just going back to Brian Clough, because we always like Brian Clough. He was a wily old fella, because his opinions on Proctor changed very quickly once the deal was done. I keep thinking, I remember reading a story once, and either one of you two fine gentlemen will know this, or one of the listeners might. Was there a player who Clough sold to Sunderland for a fair bit of money, and then after his time at Sunderland was a failure, took him back to Forest on a cut price deal, and the player then suddenly hit form again, and that often...
Ian Boyer, is it?
Ian Boyer.
Yeah, that
Ian
caused
Boyer.
a bit of disgruntlement. I think the accusation was Boyer had a long-term injury to get over. So maybe was Clough a bit smart and maybe let him do his recuperation at another club, and then when he was back to full fitness, brought him back to Forest. I don't know, but just we always talk about Clough, and we always say he had a big place in his heart for Sunderland. But he wasn't daft either, you know. If he could do something that would help him in his current position, he wouldn't think twice about it, you know.
Ian Boyer, that lad, whenever you saw him play against us, I wouldn't be the only Sunderland fan who would say, every team needs a player like him. Can we not get him? So we get him, and he looks now like nothing like the player that he was with Forest. And you're thinking, is it the players he's playing with? What is it? You know, because of course that's happening all the time. Tom Ritchie couldn't stop scoring bloody goals against we, you know, and we sign him and he doesn't strike a bat. Brett Angel, you know, for God's sake, come on. Yeah.
There's been a few, haven't there? It's not one-off.
We could
Kelvin
do with a top 10 pod of doppelgangers, doppelganger top 10.
That'd be good, actually. Yeah, absolutely.
Those two players, Kelvin, you keep saying we need. I hope those two players weren't Ian Boyer and Tom Ritchie, because we did get them in for you, and we still weren't the team we wanted to be, sadly.
I was one of the biggest. Get in there. We've got Tom Ritchie, you know. Ian Boyer, he's what a bloody player he is, you know. Yeah, and he played my position when I played myself. That's why I really, really liked Boyer as a player, you know, and it was the position I always loved to play when I was playing myself. So you kind of watch the players that play your position, don't you? You know, and I'm thinking, this lad's going to be mustard for us. Mustard. I'm telling all my mates, you know, he's going to be brilliant. What a bloody good signing this lad is. Bloody hell.
We all think we're scouts, don't we? We all think we're brilliant at unearthing these gems, and then football has a nasty habit of showing us up, sadly.
It certainly does.
I was the guy that scouted Milton Nunez, me. That's who I'd turn into.
That was your all expenses Honduran holiday, I think, wasn't it, Kelvin? 2018, November the 13th, Dan Neil made his Sunderland debut. in a game in the Football League Trophy at Morecambe. It's quite remarkable, 7 years, and Daniel's still turning out for us. And he's still classed as a young player, which just shows how young he was when he broke into the team. And November the 13th, 1979, Kelvin, a new signing that you might have scouted or you might not have scouted, arrived.
I didn't scout him. I didn't scout him. I wish I had done. Yeah. Yeah, I've got a question for you.
Kelvin.
What's a whippet, a greyhound, and an On This Week deep dive got in common?
Is this a serious question, Kelvin, or is there
Serious
a punchline?
question.
Okay.
A whippet, a greyhound, and On This Week deep dive. They all go the distance.
Oh, very good. That is very good.
It's a thought.
Is it?
Not quite
I
the
mean,
answer you're looking for, but
Joe Bolton used to like racing his greyhounds on the training pitch, didn't he? Was it greyhounds he got into bother for because he churned up the training pitch?
He did. Yeah.
Is that anything to do with it?
Well, come on. Look, Stan Cummins was a whippet of a player. He loved a bit crack with the locals and a voddy and orange at the Greyhound pub in Ferry Hill. And I'm going to indulge myself with an On This Week deep dive into the little fella's career now, if you'll allow me. Because this lad on his day was a real baller, and he'll be a fan favourite of a lot of people of our generation, and including me. He was a great lad. I mean, we didn't win much when he played for us, but he was a fantastic player to watch. If you want, it's almost like the way people talk about Len Shackleton.
Yeah.
You know, Shaq played for a longer period, but this lad could play, and he was worth the entrance fee when he was on it. He was a boy wonder. He was discovered at 11 years old by a guy who in his own right's a bit of a legend. Roy Grant was the Middlesbrough scout who unearthed Brian Clough. And it was Roy Grant who he'd gone to see another 11-year-old and came back and said, we need this lad's the most natural football player I've seen in a long time. And he got him for Middlesbrough. When Stan Cummins was flying, he could take the best of defenders on their left or their right. He could come off either foot and make them look. He could sit them on their arses. And I've seen him do that to a lot of very, very good defenders. But in many respects, his ability to make some of the best and hardest of tacklers look silly meant that he also took some pretty brutal and repeated treatment when he plays. Because one of my like very, very clear memories of him isn't just the lovely sidesteps and the beating players and the, setting goals up, which he was really good at, but of him hitting the ground in a muckle clump as some big blooming brute of a centre half just takes him out. He was only 5'4" and he was really, really slight. I think Bobby Kerr probably would have been, if you wanted a picture in your mind's eye, Bobby Kerr might have been bigger than him. Milton Nunez might have been a reasonable comparison. He was a very, very slight fella. And a different player to Jack Grealish, but I tell you, he used to draw as many fouls as Jack Grealish does these days, having just watched Jack Grealish play on Monday night. I thought he had a canny game, actually, Grealish, on Monday night. He was into Borough's first team by the time he was 17 years old. Jack Charlton was the manager. He was Sunderland's record signing before he was 21, and he was finished with English football by the time he was 26. But not a lot of people will sort of appreciate that he'd gone from English football by the time he was 26. There's a very famous coach at Middlesbrough who worked with Jackie Charlton, Harold Shepherdson. Shepherdson coached England as well. He was renowned for his skills, and he used to compare Stan Cummins and his natural ability on the ball and goal scoring to Jimmy Greaves. That was his comparison. Jack Charlton said he would be the first £1 million transfer. And another story about Charlton, I don't know if you know this about him, but he was said to be very canny with his money, Charlton. He didn't give it away all that easily. And he once bet Stan Cummins as a laddie that he wouldn't score 50 goals in a season for the youth team and the reserves. And Big Jack must have been sweating coming into the end of that season because I think Stan was on 41 goals with about 4 games to go or something. He'd have to be reaching for that fiver and it would have been killing him. When Ken Knighton bought him in 1979, it was a record fee. And he said, and it's almost like Clough like this, so he spent £300,000 and he said it was a bargain that we'd got. And I can remember sort of reading that, but I'd noticed Cummins he'd been on a number of people's radars for a while. I remember him playing for Middlesbrough and watching him and thinking, geez, Betsy, that boy can play a bit. And then finding out that he was a lifelong, even though he was just 17 then, a lifelong lads fan. From the records book say he was born in Sedgefield, but he seems to have been a Ferry Hill boy. You like a body in orange and a bit crack with the locals at the Greyhound in Ferry Hill was one of his hideout. So Sunderland were his team. He made a goal scoring debut in the autumn of 1979. He scored the following week. He had a hell of a start for it. Goal scoring debut, scores the following week. And by the end of his third week, he'd helped win a national trophy, believe it or not. And then, I think it's a couple of weeks later, he scores 4 goals and it provides an assist to Kevin Arnott as we absolutely walloped Burnley 5-0 in a game at Roker Park that I was at. It was a cracking performance and game from him. Just stop us if there's anything you want to ask, Don't let us warble on here about one of my favourite players.
Kelvin, I'm more than happy to listen. Stan Cummins fascinates me because I've heard a lot of people who watched him play and they were all equally enamoured with his skill, and he scored some important goals for us and that. So honestly, Martin might not agree. Martin might want to get to bed sometime soon. But for me, if you need to get yourself away, Martin, we'll switch the lights off for you here. when
switch the lights out and lock the door.
Yeah.
No, I'm very good. I'm enjoying it.
I'm always happy to hear about Cummins.
Yeah. He signed for Borough in 1975, amateur forms, and he went pro in 76. He plays 44 games, scores 9 goals for Borough between 75 and 79. It's Jack Charlton and Harold Shepherdson that I think that bring him through and into that Borough team. John Neal takes over as Borough manager, and he wasn't playing him regularly. He wasn't using him and playing him as much. I think when you talk to Middlesbrough fans about that period under John Neal, they're not as enamoured with what was going on with the team at the time. But he jumped at the chance to sign for Sunderland. It's his club. He's apparently been a Sunderland fan since he was 6 years old, according to him. And he signs, and he's a record signing. But within, as we were saying earlier, and you mentioned Claudio Marangoni, we're saying Marangoni, I think it's about a week later. I don't think it was that long for 380,000. So he hasn't got the tag of being Sunderland's most expensive signing for too long. We're spending money. That season, Knighton's managed to prize some money out of Tom Cowie. You know, we've got some big signings. We've got Stan Cummins, Claudio Marangoni, Chris Turner. We've spoken about him, cracking goalkeeper. Joe Hinnigan, and that football player turned professional podcaster Johnny Hawley signs for us. You know, so there's money being spent, and I'll tell you, I'll say it before I get much further. We were only 2 players off being a really good team. Where I really thought we were going to do something with this team, and I thought Ken Knighton had something going on there. I really did. I really liked the way that we came through. 79-80, you'll know, we won promotion. We were second to Leicester. In that 79-80 season, Stan Cummins, he scored 4 goals against the Mags in that season. He scored 2 in the 2 league games, and he scored 2 in the national 5-a-side Daily Express 5-a-side trophy that we won. We beat Newcastle in the semi-final. This has been a little bit of a theme today about beating Newcastle.
It's a good theme, mind, isn't it?
Yeah, you could listen to that all day. We beat them in the semi-final of that tournament 4-0. Cummins scored 2, and Kevin Arnott scored 2, and Arnott scored in every round, and apparently was the player of the tournament. But Cummins wasn't that far behind him, and it's important to remember this in terms of where his career goes. This enjoyment that he has of playing that abbreviated, that shortened game. The goals he scores against Newcastle that season, you know, I'm not the only one who of my age that would have waited since 1966, 67 for to beat Newcastle at home. And that 79-80 game was cracking. It was lovely to get the monkey off your back and to beat them buggers, because they were always turning up thinking that they would either beat you or take a point away. The Daily Express 5-a-side trophy. I mean, just you'll think I'm daft going on about this. But it was just, it was an important trophy. And I always remember Brian Clough said that about, and we were talking about another manager as well a couple of weeks ago who said we needed to win something. And it didn't matter what the trophy was, but it got where we're going. And I think that Daily Express 5-a-side trophy did that for us. The coverage, it was on national TV. There was a lot of heavy hitters playing in that tournament. Man United, Newcastle, Spurs, they were all playing. We got through to the final without conceding a goal. Our team was Turner, Mick Buckley, Sean Elliott, Kevin Arnott, John Cook and Peter Eustace were the Roland subs, and Stan Cummins played in that team. By and large, it was Turner, Buckley, Elliott, Arnott, Cummins that played every game, with Cookie and Peter Eustace coming on and playing. Fantastic sort of victory for that team to get the ball rolling for the season.
Well, I love hearing about this story, because the way it was covered and people watched it later on that night on the TV without knowing the scores, and that, it's just a nice little side to it. Just to prove the point, Kelvin, about how it was actually a bit of a statement victory. The squad photos the following season had the trophy at the front of the players. Now, whenever I saw that photo previously, I assumed that was a trophy we'd won for being promoted as runners-up that season. But no, it was this Daily Mail five-a-side competition. So the players were proud of it. And from what I remember, the players that didn't play loved it as well, because Sunderland were due to play away from home that weekend. So the whole squad travelled down early, and the players who didn't get picked to represent the team at the arena went out on the Hoy in London, by all accounts. And then later on in the night, their teammates joined them with a trophy under their arm, and they're like, "Oh well, we better make a proper night of it now and celebrate the the victory." So the lads who'd been playing at the arena needed to catch up because there were a few drinks behind their teammates, by all accounts.
I remember being in the Fulwell end for I think I'm going to say to you, it was the next home game after winning that trophy, and joining in with some of the chanters in the "We won the cup," we won the cup, yell yell, we won the cup. Come on, boys, a five-a-side trophy. But looking back on it, it was a bit of a laugh at the time, but looking back on it, I think it was a victory, a success that sort of bred some success and some confidence into the team.
We beat the Mags in the League Cup around that period as well, and you're talking about how we'd gone long periods without having successes against them. So yeah, it was a time when Knighton's plans were all coming into place. Marangoni, Cummins were now in the squad. We're getting statement wins against Newcastle. We're winning trophies on TV. It wasn't shown live, but it was shown later that night. So yeah, it was a good period. And for somebody like Stan Cummins, you want to arrive at a club and for the mood to be high and everything to be pointing in the right direction. So he couldn't have asked for a better time to sign, really.
Do you know, to keep that theme about victories against the Mags going, do you know we scored 17 goals against Newcastle that season in League Cup and the five-a-side trophy final? 17 goals, and Stan Cummins scored 4 of them. So I was at that League Cup tie, I don't know if we've ever talked about that. Have we ever gone into that on here? I seem to remember writing about it, but
I think so.
It was a cracking night. That it was a bit leery in the ground because there wasn't an awful lot of Sunderland fans there that night. But it was a cracking night. That but anyway, where are we up to? 79-80. He plays 27 times. He scores 12 goals. And we're promoted. We go into season 80-81. He plays 46 times and scores 10 goals. So we're not talking about a lad here that's going to give you 20 goals a season. That wasn't his game. He was for me, he was a lad that would create, that would assist. I think he'd have scored heavily in the metrics these days of what led to that goal, and not only with his open play, but with the number of fouls he used to draw as well, number of penalties that there's a video of his best moments for Sunderland on YouTube, worth a look, and you'll wonder, if you hadn't heard me talking about this, you would wonder why they're showing that, because what you're seeing is him being absolutely upended in the books, and there's about 3 on his best moments for Sunderland where he's just being upended by a defender that he's just done up like a kipper, and the boy just sticks a muckle leg out and just takes him over, so, but that was happening to him every bloody game you saw him play, you know, he was getting a humph like that. You know, and you do wonder about the you know, the accumulation of that kind of battering on a lad. We weren't talking about about Mark Proctor here, who was a sturdy, well-built boy. You know, we're talking about a slim, waif-like figure. You know, I think we've said before about players that come on the pitch and you think they're the ball boy or something like that. If it hadn't been for Stan Cummins' mustache, you would have thought he was a ball boy. 80 and 81 would go into that first division. He's voted Supporters Player of the Year, voted Northeast Player of the Year for 1981. He was flying. He was cracking. Great to watch. Productive, you know, because sometimes that used to be, if you got into a debate about him with other fans, end product might be something that people might throw out there. But I always thought that was a bit bogus. You know, I always thought, God, you know, the free kick led to the goal. You know, it was him that got fouled. He's charging down the wing, you know, and Bars has said, I think I've already said this, I loved the way that, I swear to you, he just used to look at a player and he knew what side to take him on. And it would be, he wasn't a one-trick pony. Yeah. You know, he could go either way and with either foot. He was, I would not have liked to have tried to mark that lad, you know. He was, on his day, he was a very, very hard player to keep a hold of, and deceptively quick as well. It wasn't just skill; it was he had a bit of pace about him as well. Unfortunately, you know, our first season back in that first division, there's quite a sour relationship between Ken Knighton and Tom Cowie. There's reasons for that, because 79-80, we're talking about Cowie releasing the purse strings and getting players in. We'll go into the first division, and one of the things that Knighton did was invested a bit of money in Tom Ritchie, and it didn't pan out. I mean, I defy anybody to watch Tom Ritchie play before that, watch him play against us, and not think, if we get the chance, that lad's worth signing. You know, we get the chance, we sign him, and it just doesn't happen. And ironically, it was Tom Ritchie, I think, that was the final straw for Cowie, although they didn't have a great relationship, Knighton and Cowie. Tom Ritchie was just, I think, the final draw for Cowie. He sacks Knighton, and the very next game, Ritchie scores a hat-trick. You know, just a game too far, you know. But Cummins is playing all the way through that period. I think he has quite a good relationship with Knighton. Mick Doherty had been signed. That was another good signing. Mick Doherty had come in and worked alongside Ken Knighton. It was Jimmy Adamson that signed Mick Doherty, but they had a good relationship as well. So Mick Doherty's caretaker manager, he sees the team through to the end of the season, but it's a tough season, and we'll finish 17th. Alan Durbin's given the job, but in the meantime, Stan Cummins takes himself off to the USA and plays the summer in the NASL. He plays for Seattle Sounders. He plays alongside two good lads, Bruce Rioch, very, very good player, and Alan Hudson, who was a sulky kind of. He played at Chelsea. Hudson, he was a nice ball player to watch. But he comes back from that. It's first of all, that's not the first time he plays in North America, because he did it when he was at Middlesbrough. I'm sure it was 1977. He goes and plays 18 games for Minnesota Kicks, I think they were called. The point of that is he gets the chance to play against players like Pelé, Giorgio Chingalia, Franz Beckenbauer, and he's idol. Guess who his idol was?
Was it a
Stan
Sunderland player?
Cummins.
Was it a Sunderland player?
It wasn't, but it was a player who you would think, given the way Cummins played, it was George Best. He loved George Best, and he gets to play against him in that first spell in '77 when he goes across. So he goes back in '81 and plays 15 games, scores 4 goals for Seattle Sounders. There's something about the pace of the football over there that he likes. I don't think he's getting booted up a height every week either. Every time he goes past a player. But he comes back and he's got a little injury when he comes back, and Durban's just taken over, and so he misses the start of the season. And I don't know whether it's the injury. There's something about the relationship between Cummins and Durban that doesn't quite work. I mean, much later on, Cummins describes Durban as the king of the mourners, was how he described Alan Durban. And so I don't think that they had a great relationship. But he does come back and he plays 41 games that season, but he misses the start of the season. I think it's about five league games, 41 games, scores 5 goals, but it's another tough season. And Sunderland finish 19th that season. Tough, two hard seasons back to back, and the change. There's no continuity. Knighton's gone. Durban comes in. Durban's got different ideas. You sort of sometimes feel for players. I sometimes say that would be really hard if somebody comes in. We're just saying before there, Len Ashurt comes in after Durban, and it's just whatever you were doing, we're not doing that anymore. We're doing this now. It would drive you bonkers. If you were, you'd have to be really hard kind of character to just manage that all the time and not be affected by it.
This whole thing, Kelvin, with the players going off to America, because I don't think Cummins was the only one, wasn't he? Like Sean Elliott go over and play in America as well. And I remember reading something, it might be before the 81 season, where Alan Durban wasn't able to get his team together in pre-season because he had Cummins and Sean Elliott and maybe somebody else as well. It was over in America, and they actually, whether they actually came back on the eve of the season or came back injured or what, but they missed both of them missed the first few games. Why were players going over to America in pre-season?
Money,
just for the money. It's surprising that the clubs would. I know it's different times and it's hard to compare, but it just seems odd, doesn't it, nowadays for players to go and do that.
It's hard to credit. You couldn't imagine it happening these days unless it was a plan, unless there was some sort of logic to he's been injured, he's not had much football. Let's get him away in the sunshine, get him to play a few games, and when he comes back, he'll be ready to go for us. There doesn't seem to be much for Sunderland much value for Sunderland in them lads going and playing the summer in America, unless they've not had much football, I would imagine. So you're right. I'm trying to think who the player was. I think there was 3, Martin. But I cannot think who
I
it
can't
is.
remember who the other one was.
Mick, I don't know if Mick Buckley was one of them, but I could be making that up. You're right, though.
I don't know, gents, if it was whilst he was at Sunderland, but Sam Allardyce definitely went to America because that had an impact on his management styles and some of his theories. But I don't know if that was whilst he was on the books at Sunderland or at a different stage in his career. Doesn't help you find out
Interesting.
who the mystery man is, because
No.
probably wasn't
And an
Allardyce.
interesting sort of, Stan Cummins, Sam Allardyce, two completely juxtaposed players to, but it says something about Allardyce. I mean, I've criticised him before on here, and and given ground to the fact that he wasn't a dinosaur. He was prepared to go and experience other places and learn from these places. I think when Cummins went, I think the style of football just suited him down to the ground, the lifestyle. He liked the feel of that, and it suited him down to the ground. But it's another tough season anyway. 1982-83, Cummins is still there. He's played 41 games despite missing the start of the season in 81-82. He's still there, but his relationship with Durban's still not good. I think at the end of that, I was trying to think the 81-82 season. I always get this one confused. I remember going to Liverpool on the last day of the season, and we needed a result to stay up. It was one of them results elsewhere, plus we needed a result to stay up, and we beat Liverpool, and Stan Cummins scored the goal. And that day was one of his 9.5 out of 10 games. For every time he got the ball, Liverpool, who were I think they were heading into the European Cup final. And it might have been one of the reasons why we beat them. But every time he got the ball, he looked like he just, I'm here. I'm going to take all these boys on. I'm sure he put the ball through Alan Hansen's legs at one point. He was just bloody great that day, just on fire, And they weren't necessarily blootering him up a height every time he went by them. They were sort of looking after themselves. And who wouldn't, with the European Cup final coming up? I think that was that season, 81-82, coming towards the end of the season. I was at that game at Anfield, and he was brilliant. But 82-83 comes along. He only plays 32 games. Only, I'm saying, scores 5 goals. Injuries impacting a little bit. He had this long running hamstring issue, and it's not like again we're talking about this. It's not like it's a broken leg or he's got a plaster cast on. He's got this long running issue with his hamstrings, and he has, if not one fallout with Alan Durban, I think there's a bit of a running sort of bad feeling and a fallout is had with Durban. And in the middle of all that, he's coming towards the end of his contract that he's signed. And the rules at the time, I can't remember these verbatim, but if he was offered a new contract and it wasn't better than what he had been on, he was entitled to a free transfer. And that's exactly what happens. He doesn't want to play for Durban. He's got a fractious relationship with Durban. He's had 3 hard seasons playing one good season and effectively 3 tough seasons playing for Durban. And he takes the route of a free transfer. So you've got a lad that's very, very saleable, an asset. If the club didn't want him anymore, they could have gotten money for him. But because of the relationship, he just goes off he takes a free transfer and shoots off to Crystal Palace. But when Stan Cummins himself talks about this period, and he said he made a big mistake, and I was hoping as I started reading about this that he was going to say he wished he'd never left. That wasn't what he said. He said, I made a big mistake. Arthur Cox had been speaking to him.
Yeah.
About signing for Newcastle, and because of his allegiances with as a fan, he said, no, I don't think I can do that. And off he went to Crystal Palace. But he's got a wry sense of humour, Stan Cummins, because he says, and poor Newcastle, they had to make do with second best. You know, they went to Carlisle and signed Peter Beardsley, and look what happened there. But actually, look what did happen there, because Kevin Keegan, came along, and they had all that Keegan success, didn't they? And I suppose there's a little bit of him thinks, I could have been part of that. But I'm a Sunderland fan, and I'm going to go to Palace and go at the big lights. But he never really settled at Palace. He didn't like London. And didn't settle there. He played 28 games, scored 7 goals. He comes into the 84-85 season. He's 10 games into that season. And he goes back to Sunderland, signs for Sunderland. Len Ashurst's the manager by now. Ashurst brings him back. He plays 17 games. He scores no goals. And I'm watching him. He's cup-tied as well. So he plays no part in that League Cup run. And I'm watching him this season. And I'm thinking about the bloke that I'd watched before he went to Crystal Palace. And he doesn't look full on. I'm not saying not committed. That's not what I'm saying, because he was quite a feisty lad on the pitch. You know, he was like an irritating gnat when he played. He just wouldn't leave you alone, you know. And he was a bit like there were similarities sometimes between, if you watch Bobby Kerr come through and watch him come through when he didn't have the ball, he would keep going at you, Stan Cummins. You know, if you beat him, he would just come back around again and have another go. He was never going to knock anybody over, Cummins, but he was like an irritating gnat when he didn't have the ball. And I would say trying and effort would never have been an issue with him. It was just how fit was he, you know, and he seemed to have lost just a little bit of, was it pace? Was it his jinkiness? Because he had this marvellous ability to change direction when he was running, you know. I was talking about Mark Proctor earlier, and he had this Samoan sidestep where he just ran through people, but Cummins was exactly the opposite. Sometimes when you were watching him, you couldn't work out which way he was going to go, you know. He's marvellous balance and ability to come off either foot, but he looked, when he came back, like he'd lost a little bit of that. You throw in the pressure that the team were under, the pressure on the team every game that they were coming out right from the earliest point of that season. I wouldn't have imagined that Roker Park would have been an easy place to play from the earliest point in the season, even allowing for a League Cup run. There was a lot of anxiety in the stadium. You've been there yourself. We're great when we're winning. You know, we're not the easiest crowd to play in front of if things ain't quite going right. Do you know, on the other night at the Everton game, I had people behind me that were reminding me on about that. I thought, you bugger, you look at the football we've seen. We're 1-0 down. We're 10 minutes on from that, and yous are starting on the team. Traore was getting it in the neck. But it's that kind of feeling, and you'll say that we're all the same, all supporters are the same, but there's something about the Sunderland crowd when things aren't going right, it must be hard. And I thought that season was terribly hard, and I didn't think he was quite at his physical best. And Ashurst was wheeling and dealing, and he didn't quite know what his best team was. You couldn't quite see. I used to say, and I've said on here, I could see what Alan Durbin was trying to do at times with these teams, but I never got my head around. I loved him as a player, Lenny Ashurt, but I never got my head around what he was trying to do with the team. I like to be able to see a little bit of pattern. I might not always agree with it, but I like to know what we're trying to do here, you know. And I never got it. And Cummins sometimes used to just look like he was out there like a bump on a log. You know, if he drifted out of the wing. A lot of people, in terms of his play, you know, was he a winger? Was he an inside forward? He was one of them lads that was either. I'll tell you, if I'd been a fullback, I would not have wanted to mark him. You know, but he could drift in and create space by drifting in, and he could come down either flank. He could. He was a cracking lad to watch like that. You know what happens in 84, 85? He plays no part in the League Cup. Sunderland get to Wembley. He's not playing. Big stage. He's not playing. And we get relegated in what is a turgid season. Interestingly, relegated along with Norwich, who played in the League Cup final. Ashurt gets sacked. Laurie McMenemy comes in, and Cummins has no sense of McMenemy wanting him. He's got no sense of McMenemy even like looking at him and thinking, I wonder if we could get the best out of Stan Cummins, you know. And he takes the offer of a contract in the USA. He's been there before. He gets offered a really good contract with good money, believe it or not, to go and play in the US major indoor soccer league. Who knew that indoor soccer was such a thing? And off he goes, and that's where his career finishes, playing in the United States Indoor Soccer League. He plays there till 1990. He starts off, I think it's Minnesota. He goes back to and plays indoor soccer, and then he goes to the team folds, and he goes to Kansas Kicks, where he eventually settles and raises his family. He plays quite a lot of games in that league, 123 for Minnesota between 85 and 88. He scores 41 goals. He plays 48 games for Kansas Kick. In the 88-89 season, he scores 6 goals. He retires from playing in 1990 and does his UFA B license, coaching license. But he stays in America and he sets up coaching school. He's doing coaching with youths. He's and enjoying that. He enjoys the lifestyle out there. He does say in a couple of places. I didn't realize this. I had no idea about this until I sort of started checking back as to what he'd been up to since he'd stopped playing. I knew he'd gone into coaching. I just didn't know some of the stuff latterly. But did you know that he'd applied for the twice in the early 90s for the Sunderland job? He says he did.
Yeah, right.
That he got and that he got nice letters back, but basically saying no thanks. He offered his services to Middlesbrough when they were going through their tough time. He offered to come back and do something there. I think that was a more a gracious kind of knockback. But so he was keen at one point to come back and try his hand at coaching, managing. But to my knowledge, I think he's the best that I can find says that he's still out there. What I think's stark for the people that saw him play, and there'll be a lot of fans like me, maybe he's listening to this thinking, "Wow, I loved watching that lad play." You know, he was great to watch play. But it's a regret, is it not, that he was 26
it's
when he stopped
incredibly young,
playing.
isn't
He
it?
didn't stop playing because he was injured and couldn't play anymore. Yes, he was struggling with injuries. One of his last games for Sunderland, poignant last sort of run-outs with Sunderland, was he was the captain of Sunderland. He captained them to the final and to the trophy in the Bradford City Disaster Fund of North East of England six-a-side tournament. And we won that tournament. And what I find, if you think of the symmetry of that, he starts with the National Daily Express 5-a-side tournament, and he finishes with a 6-a-side tournament for such a poignant thing, in 1985. It is a regret we didn't see more of this little wizard, whether it was for us or somebody else. He plays 251 games in first-class football in England. He scores 50 goals. He's slight build. He's 5'4". He took some brutal tackles and collisions in his time in English football. And while I remember he's with absolute pleasure skating by people and putting big defenders on their arses. I also remember him hitting the deck loads of times as felled by an opponent who he's about to make a fool of. He's a superb player on his day and a real fan's favourite. The little big man, Stan Cummins.
Very good. And I think it's an interesting thing as well with him in that last season. Obviously, you mentioned he was cup tied and missed the League Cup final, Milk Cup final. But he was cup tied because he played against us. So he played for Palace against us in the second round, I think, of the Milk Cup, and actually scored against us at Roker Park. So his last goal at Roker Park was actually for Crystal Palace
against us. Yeah. It's a cracking start, that, actually. I watched that game as well. And I clapped his goal.
I
wouldn't have been the only one.
You're not one of them. Come on.
Totally. Fairness just oozes out of every pore, Martin. Oozes out of every pore.
That's a nice little nugget from Martin there, and really interesting listening to Kelvin, because he is a player I've heard a lot of, and yeah, you get this sense of what might have been from what you said there, Kelvin. I wonder if he's struggling to get to the Greyhound these days in Ferry Hill if he's living in America. That must be quite a trip, bless him, to go to his local. Something that we were querying earlier, lads, about who was the other player who was playing abroad. I think I had a little look through one of the books there. I think it was Barry Siddle who spent summer 1980.
You're right.
Yeah. Summer 1981.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
He was with the Vancouver Whitecaps. And obviously Siddle had this battle with Chris Turner for the number 1 spot. So that probably didn't do him any good. And what really fascinates me there is you've talked about how Cummins had various disputes with Durban. I seem to think Siddle did as well. I seem to think there was a period where Siddle was told to stay away from the club because of disputes over contracts and this, that, and the other. So Cummins, to me, comes across as like you were saying, how if you were playing against him, even if you beat him, he would be back at you. He seems quite like a lively character, like a bit of a pesky type. So you can maybe understand why a manager gets a bit annoyed with that. Whereas Siddle, my understanding of him was he was quite a laid-back fella. And yet he also had his disputes with the club. So Durban did a brilliant job at Sunderland. And like you said, Kelvin, there was a lot of people kind of thought, we're on the cusp of here, just 2 more players under Durban, and it might have been different. But even even a popular manager like him could have his fallouts with people. It fascinates me.
All of the people all of the time, you just kind of keep everybody happy. If I could just pick up one point, there was never any contest between Barry Siddle and Chris Turner.
No, fair enough. I just fair dues. But again, all these things are interesting, Kelvin, because I read about these things and I remember them just from having read them. So when I speak to yourself, when I speak to Martin, or when Chris is on, I love getting those memories of people who remember it at the time, because they can maybe give you a slightly different angle as to how it's presented in the history books. Love all this type of thing. And yeah, Cummins is on a long list of former Sunderland players I wish I'd seen in the flesh.
Very good. We'll take a short break there. We'll be back after the break to continue this episode of On This Week. We'll see you soon.
Once upon a mundane morning, Barb's day got busy without warning. A realtor in need of an open house sign. No, 50 of them, and designed before 9.
My head hurts.
Any mighty tools to help with this plight? Aha! Barb made her move. She opened Canva and got in the groove.
Bulk creating Canva sheets. Create 50 signs fit for suburban streets.
Done in a click, all complete.
Sweet!
Now, imagine what your dreams can become when you put imagination to work at canva.com.
Mike's down, suited up. The Football Content Awards are back for 2025, and you can be there. Join Sports Social Podcast Network and a host of your favourite content creators at Elland Road, home of Leeds United, on Thursday, 20th of November. We'll be celebrating the podcasters, YouTubers, clubs, brands, journalists and players who make football media what it is. You'll get a 2-course meal, a welcome drink, live entertainment and an after party that doesn't end at full time. Plus, you'd have to be a finalist to attend. Just someone who loves the beautiful game and the stories around it. Grab your tickets now on Eventbrite. Just search Football Content Awards 2025.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Find the biggest voices in sports on the Sports Social Podcast Network. Like Football Clichés with Adam Hurrey, Charlie Eccleshare and me, David Walker. It's a truly unique podcast all about the language of football. The words, the phrases and all the tiny things you didn't think you cared about until now. Search Football Clichés and listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Welcome back to On This Weekend. We are starting this last segment of the show with November the 14th. And we're going to go all the way back to 1891. Sunderland beat Derby County 7-1 with John Campbell scoring 4 times. He got 39 goals in 29 games that season, which is incredible. 1964, George Hardwick was appointed as Sunderland manager. This was 3.5 months after Alan Brown had left. And one of I think there was an awful lot of talk about things going on behind the scenes with George Hardwick, which he eventually didn't get the job permanently at the end of that season, but he did make Brian Clough youth team manager, which I think if Hardwick had stayed, Clough stays, and then all sorts of things are a little bit different after that. George Hardwick does have... Sorry, go on, Kelvin.
I was just going to say that was the crack, wasn't it? That that was one of his first decisions. Was when he was offered the job was to bring Brian Clough in to work with the youth team, and Hardwick said when he didn't get the job that one of the reasons for that was he wanted to make Clough his number 2. Not only that bit, but he wouldn't sack him.
Yeah.
Apparently, he says the board had told him to sack Brian Clough and that he wouldn't sack him, and that was why he didn't get the job. But there were other... You're right, Martin. There was some other things.
Yeah, other things going on, I think, as well. But that another sliding doors moment.
A fascinating period, that, though, because, the terrible start of the season, Brownie and the club have this fallout. Unbelievable. Terrible start of the season. We haven't won a game. Had we won maybe one game? We hadn't won a game, is my memory of it. This was just before my time. And Hardwick's working as an ICI supervisor. He's working for ICI, but he's moonlighting as he does a little bit of match day reporting. And he comes along to the Burnley game at Roker Park to report on the game, and he gets called into he gets a message to say, would he pop up and see the chairman, and they offer him the job. It's a crazy period that, and then he did quite a good job because we were languishing. I think we were about 21st or something in the table when he comes in, and we finished 15th, and he does do quite a good job, but he doesn't get the chance to have a second season at it because they bring the star that was Ian McCall in.
Yeah, I think we'd
and,
won.
Of course,
we'd won a couple of games up to that point that season, but yeah, he did do exceptionally well in comparison after he'd taken over. But of course, the directors essentially been managing the team before that, selection committee as they called in those days. And there's a very interesting one.
I was just going to say Charlie Hurley had been a bit involved as they were with the directors. He'd been a little bit involved as club captain in trying to keep things on the straight and narrow whilst they sorted out the manager post. And he said in his book, in his biography, that it was only the inner circle knew. He said there wasn't anybody in the club outside of that tight inner circle that had an idea that they were going to offer Hardwick the job. So it's a surprise, really. But he did all right.
No, I think he did. And obviously George Hardwick had a long career at Middlesbrough as well. But very interesting stat with Hardwick is that he is the only player to have captained England on every single appearance he made for them. He played 13 games and he captained England 13 times. So,
Gentleman George Hardwick, very dapper looking gent, bit like myself, you can.
Just beat me to it, Kelvin.
Yes, Martin, I'm in total agreement with you as well about our dapper Kelvin. I'm going to be big-headed here, gents, if you don't mind, and point you towards an article I wrote for Roker Report a couple of years ago, 29th of April, 1965. Just we've suggested there some of the issues around Hardwick's departure. I wrote about it for the website a couple of years ago. I've tried to skirt around the issue and some of the whispers. There was a couple of theories about why Hardwick behind the scenes needed to be moved on. So just if anybody wants any additional reading, I'll just plug a bit of work I did a couple of years ago on that one.
Very good. 1987, Sunderland played a first-round FA Cup tie. If I missed something there or not. The way Kelvin's laughing, I thought Andrew dropped a little one-liner in that had gone completely over my head.
Skirting around issues.
Yeah, he's still skirting around the issue. That's all right. 1987, we played our first pre-Christmas FA Cup tie. For almost 100 years after relegation, we played in the FA Cup first round at home to Darlow at Roker Park, and we beat them with 2 Paul Atkinson goals. 1997, 10 years later, Craig Russell and Nicky Sumby swapped clubs. Russell, of course, came through the ranks of Sunderland, and Manchester City was Nicky Sumby's home. We swapped the two of them, and I think we got the better of the deal, with all fairness to Craig, because Nicky Sumby became an absolutely pivotal part of our team for the next couple of years. 2010 was that 3-0 game at Chelsea where Neda Manoa danced through the defence to score, and Asamoah Gyan and Danny Welbeck got goals, and Bolo Zenden did his famous dad dancing. And 2020, so only 5 years ago, right? If you want any indication of how far we've come in a relatively short period of time, 2020, we played a game behind closed doors against MK Dons at the Stadium of Light. Russell Martin was in charge of MK Dons. We got beat 2-1, and Remy Matthews was in goal for us. So if you want any just little reminder about the vast improvement that's gone on over the past few years, there it is in one simple fixture.
Have you got the goal scorers in front of you there?
I know Max Power got ours, I think.
Yeah, I was trying to remember. Didn't they have a centre forward who scored an absolute peach of a goal? Trying to think who that was. who went on and did.
Cameron Jerome and Scott Fraser penalty. So
Okay,
Cameron Jerome was always
yeah.
he falls into the Julian Joachim category, which I'm going to come on to very shortly because he always seems to bag a goal against us.
Seamless link.
Well, very, very seamless. November the 15th, 1947, we beat Liverpool 5-1 at home. Willie Watson, who we mentioned last week, he got 1 goal, and Dickie Davis got 2, and a chap called Albert Quinn got 2, and they were his only goals for Sunderland. 1950, England played Wales at Roker Park, and this was the last full international to be played. I can't be right, can it? Because we played, must be the last full England international to be played at Roker Park, because obviously we had the World Cup games in '66. So it must be the last full England international. But Trevor Ford was playing for Wales, and he got both of the goals for the visitors. Willie Watson, again mentioning him, plays for England, as did Jackie Milburn, Wilf Mannion, and Ray Daniel, who was at Arsenal at the time. 1992, here's the Julian Joachim seamless link. He scored 2 for Leicester as they beat us 2-1 at Roker Park. Peter Davenport got 1 for us, but he also missed a penalty, and Simon Grayson was in the Leicester team. 1995 was the end of an era as Gary Bennett left the club. He moved to Carlisle in the free transfer, and that was Peter Reid's promotion season. So Peter Reid had come in. I think Benno had played a few games towards the end of that season, but like Tony Norman, Peter Reid decided to kind of move on from some established players in that squad. And although Benno was there for the start of that season, I don't think he actually played and didn't make an appearance, and he went off to Carlisle. So 1997, the day after Nicky Sumby signs, Nicky Sumby makes his debut. And he came on as sub at half-time for Martin Smith down in Fratton Park as Sunderland beat Portsmouth 4-1. Niall Quinn, Lee Clark, Alan Johnson and Nicky Sumby got the goals. In 2008, that was that game. I think we mentioned this game last week as well, where played Blackburn away and Jibril Cisse scored, and he ran up to Roy Keane and shook his hand on the bench. That was that game in 2008. Sunderland beat Blackburn 2-1. And we will move on now to November the 16th, the final day of our week. 1935, we had a game against Brentford that we won 5-1. Bobby Gurney got a couple. Len Duns, Rach Carter and Patsy Gallagher. We had Kevin Ball's birthday earlier in the show. In 1947, Bobby Kerr was born. So it must be a good month to be a Sunderland captain to be born. So if anybody's born on this week in history, then you've got a chance of becoming a legendary Sunderland captain by all accounts. 1963, we beat Leyton Orient 4-1 at home. And in 1974, Paul Robson, who we mentioned at the top of the show, celebrating his birthday, he got 2 goals as Sunderland beat Fulham 3-1 at Craven Cottage. Now, I think this is the game that my mother tells a story about. So this was the day that Mum and Dad got married. And they have the wedding ceremony at the church, have the reception do. Drive off to I think they went to Carlisle for the honeymoon. Drive off to Carlisle, arrive at the hotel, check in. My dad puts match of the day on, doesn't know the score. Action from Craven Cottage, Sunderland win 3-1. And he turns around to my mother and says, "Well, that's made me day, that has."
Get in.
And they're still very happily married, so there you go.
Good. Well done. Well done.
So I think that's a positive note to end this week's episode of On This Week On. Andrew, if you can compose yourself, I'm going to ask you if you've got a quiz question lined up, mate.
Yes, best wishes to Mr. and Mrs. Wanless on their wedding anniversary. Yeah, we are going to talk next time about the 17th to the 23rd of November. So right at the start of the episode, we'll be touching, I assume, on a game that was played on the 17th of November, 2002, when we got a remarkable draw at Liverpool. I've written remarkable in my notes, and it genuinely was. I'd like to know, please, who had an absolute stormer in goal So who was Sunderland's goalkeeper that day when we played Liverpool?
I think I might know it. Need a sense check whether I've got the right game or not, but we've got a whole week to get that one right. So thank you, Kelvin. Always a pleasure, mate.
Cheers, guys. Have a muckle good day.
And thank you, Andrew, as well.
Thank you. I don't know if a canny day is better than a muckle day, but please, everyone, have a canny day, have a muckle day, have a great day.
Indeed. And thank you to everybody who's listened. We'll be back next Monday with another episode of On This Week. And of course, we'll be back tomorrow with another How We're the podcast. But until then, it's goodbye from us.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
If we knew more about our sleep, what would we do differently? Would we go to bed at a consistent time or take steps to reduce interruptions to our sleep? With the all-new Sleep Score, Apple Watch measures your bedtime consistency, interruptions, and sleep duration. Then, every morning it combines these factors into an easy-to-understand score from 1 to 100. So you'll know how to take the quality of your sleep from good to excellent. Introducing the new Sleep Score on Apple Watch. iPhone 11 or later required.